Create your world with Vinuyon Ramos, the change catalyst. This is episode 4 and welcome back. And today we're looking at royal reality, living between the promise and process. The sun rises everywhere, just like it does here. I'm in Egypt. I'm back in Egypt doing episode 4. Imagine in those days, day after day, year after year, 40 years to be exact. What began as a moment of miraculous deliverance, which I shared last time, became a journey far longer than anyone had expected. A journey that exposed the gap between divine promise and human expectation. Last time we explored the 3 keys to breaking free from limitation. But today I want us to face an even greater challenge, or look at a different challenge. How do we live when the promised land seems perpetually on the horizon? When reality doesn't match the fairy tale we have imagined? Welcome to the true battleground of faith, the space between promise and process. Exodus 16 verse 3 records a startling confession from the Israelites. Just weeks after their miraculous delivery, they said to Moses and Aaron, "If only we had died by the Lord's hand in Egypt. There we sat around pots of meat and ate all the food we wanted. But you have brought us into this desert to starve this entire assembly to death." Does that sound familiar? It's the voice that whispers, maybe it was better before. Maybe my expectations were too high. Maybe this faith journey isn't what I signed up for. I have had those whispers. I call this the royal reality crisis. The moment when God's children destined for nobility face the brutal gap between heavenly promises and earthly realities. Let me share something personal. When I was 10 years old, I gave my life to Christ. I was filled with fairy tale visions of what following God would mean. Mountains moving at my command, heaven touching earth in every moment, divine provision falling from the sky on a regular basis. 44 years later, I'm still wondering where some of those butterflies went. Still questioning why God doesn't just make things happen. Just let them fall on my laps. And I know I'm not alone. This is the universal journey of faith. The Israelites' journey reveals 3 profound principles for living in this tension between promise and process. So the first principle recognizes the purpose of the wilderness. Deuteronomy 8 verse 2 to 3 gives us extraordinary insight. It says, "Remember how the Lord your God led you all the way in the wilderness these 40 years to humble and test you in order to know what was in your heart." So whether or not you would keep his commands, he wanted to understand. He humbled you, causing you to hunger and then feeding you with manna, which neither you nor your ancestors had known. You've never seen it before. This was to teach you that man does not live on bread alone, but on every word that comes from the mouth of the Lord. There was purpose in that wilderness. There was divine purpose in the experience of the wilderness. It wasn't a detour. It was a classroom, a divine laboratory designed to transform slave thinking into royal identity. In Egypt, remember, the Israelites worked for their provision. In the wilderness, God was teaching them a new way. Dependency not on human effort, but on divine relationship. So what if your wilderness isn't punishment? What if it's preparation? What if God is stripping away your need to control, to earn, to prove, and to teach you to simply receive? Second principle Embrace the paradox of royal identity, please. Here's the stunning truth. The Israelites were simultaneously slaves and royalty. Exodus 19 verse 6, it declares they would be a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. Yet they still carried slave mentality. This is the great paradox of faith. We are both becoming and already are. We are works in progress, living from a completed position. Do you get it? It's already done, but you are only unveiling and unpacking what has already been done. Romans 8:30 puts it this way, and those he predestined, he also called. Those he called, he also justified. Those he justified, he also glorified. Notice the tense, not will glorify, but glorified, as if it has already been done. It is done. This is royal thinking. This is faith vision. Not denying your reality, but seeing through it to a greater reality. Can you see beyond your current reality? Hebrews 11:1 tells us that faith is the substance of things hoped for. It is the evidence of things that are not seen. Faith isn't pretending things aren't hard. It's having a 2020 vision in two directions simultaneously. Seeing both your current circumstances and your promised destination. Does this make sense to you? Principle number 3, practice daily manna living. This is one I love. The Israelites received manna one day at a time and they could not store it. They couldn't stock it up. They couldn't secure their future through human effort. It has to be divine. It had to be supernatural. Can you live like that? Can you live by faith? Exodus 16:19-20 tells us that Moses said to them, no one is to keep any of it until morning. However, some of them paid no attention to Moses. They kept part of it until morning because they thought, let us hoard, let us keep, let us plan in case. But it was full of maggots and it began to smell by the next day. There's something very profound here. God was teaching them and us, myself, to live in divine rhythm rather than human anxiety. Jesus echoed this in Matthew 6:34. He says, therefore do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself. Each day has enough trouble of its own. Matthew 6:11 also says that this is how we should pray. Give us today our daily bread. Daily manna living isn't about scarcity. It's about recognizing the source of your provision, not your effort, but God's faithfulness. What does this mean for you today? I really wanted to do this because I want you to understand the gap between your expectation and your experience, and that this isn't failure of faith. It's the very place faith is forged. That gap is where faith is forged. It's not failure. Isaiah 55 verse 8-9 reminds us that for God's thoughts are not our thoughts, neither are his ways our ways. This is what God declares in Isaiah 55 verse 8-9. As the heavens are higher than the earth, so are God's ways higher than our ways, and his thoughts are thoughts. So the Israelites wanted Egypt's security with freedom's benefits. They wanted the best of the two worlds. They wanted the promised land without the journey that would transform them into people capable of possessing it. Don't we want the same? The crown without the cross, the throne without the training. Here's the liberating truth. When we live by faith, we're not denying reality. We're seeing far beyond it to a greater reality. Hebrews 11:27 says that Moses preserved because he saw him who is invisible. Moses persevered because he saw him who is invisible. 2 Corinthians verse 4:18 tells us to fix our eyes not on what is seen, but on what is unseen. Since what is seen is temporary and what is unseen is eternal. This is not escapism, it's royal vision. It's seen from God's throne room's perspective. So I ask you today, what fairy tale expectations are you releasing? Not to settle for less, but to embrace God's greater story. Where have you been measuring God's faithfulness by your timeline rather than His eternal purposes? How might your wilderness actually be preparing you for your promised land? In our next episode, we will explore how to exercise your authority as a co-creator. But for now, I want to invite you to embrace these 3 principles. Recognize the purpose in your wilderness. Embrace the paradox of your royal identity and practice daily manna living. This is Vinuyon Ramos, your change catalyst. Your promised land is still ahead, and every step of the journey is shaping you to rule there. I want to show you again that I am in Egypt, because I keep thinking, what is going on? Why is God bringing me back here? Just to do the 4th episode, because I have not been able to record another episode since I left the 3rd episode I did a few weeks ago. But I'm back here again, and that is, if you can see, the Red Sea. I hope you can see it. I'll be back. Episode 5 loading. See you soon.